Hi everyone and welcome to the webinar. We're going to get going shortly once people arrive. They're just trickling in now. Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar on the UK-Australia season. My name is Dom Hastings and I'm a Programme Manager at the British Council based in the UK. I'm going to be hosting today's webinar, so it's great to see so many people join. We've had over 250 people register for the webinar and I can see everyone trickling in now. We are captioning the webinar, and if you would like to view the captions, you can click the closed caption button at the bottom of the screen. Thank you to Claire Hill, who is providing the captions for us today. I'm going to start by inviting our panel to introduce themselves. So can I ask you all to join me on screen? I'm joined by three colleagues, another from the Australian High Commission, but I'll start off by inviting Helen to introduce herself.
Thank you, Dom. My name is Helen Salmon. I am the Director of the British Council in Australia. I would like to start with an acknowledgement of country, which is what we do when we gather formally in Australia. My colleague Michael and I are both coming to you today from Gadigal land. The Gadigal are part of the Eora Nation and their land would be best known to you in the UK as the southern area just south of Sydney Harbour. We pay our respects to the elders of the Gadigal, past, present and emerging, and we would also like to extend that respect to the elders of hundreds of language groups across this country. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Michael.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to join you this evening, my time at least. My name is Michael Napthali. I'm the Director of the Season Programme on behalf of the Australian High Commission based in London. For the moment, I'm here in Sydney. Back to you, Dom.
Thank you. And Rebecca? Oh, you're on mute, Rebecca.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Seymour. I'm the Director of Festivals and Seasons at the British Council. And at the British Council, Festivals and Seasons are our priority programmes, which we develop with government and all the devolved administrations of the UK, Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and in this case, our partner country, in this case, the Federation of Australia and the Department for Foreign Affairs. Seasons are closer to the cultural diplomacy spectrum of cultural relations. And they are cultural platforms for the arts and for education, aiming to develop closer and deeper ties between our two countries, which build understanding and ultimately trust. I'm really excited about the UK-Australia season because it's a genuinely bilateral programme, and we're working very closely with the Australian High Commission. Their season takes place in the UK, starting in August and runs until September 2021. The British Council-led season begins in September 2021 and runs until March 2022. Thank you, Dom.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So The format for today's webinar is that we're going to hear from our speakers, and they'll be giving us an overview of the season and in detail the call out that we've recently launched. And we'll then open the floor to you to ask questions. The focus today is very much on UK organisations who wish to participate in the season in Australia, and there will be another opportunity for Australian organisations to have that conversation in the coming weeks. We expect today's session to last around 40 minutes, after which we'll keep the chat open if people want to keep talking. But if there are lots of questions, we can go on a little bit longer. We'll finish up at the latest in around about 1 hour from now. We'll get to questions after today's speakers, and if you wish to ask a question, you can type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. Questions don't get published immediately on Zoom, but we will read them all and we'll try to get through as many as possible. If we don't get to your question today, we'll follow up afterwards, either by adding any frequently asked questions to the FAQ section of our website, or we'll also provide an email address where you can get in touch directly with queries as the deadline approaches. So I think it's probably time to get straight into things, and I'd like to invite Helen to come back to talk to us a little bit more about the UK-Australia season. Helen.
Thank you, Dom. I'd like to talk to you very briefly about why now. As many of you know, in the context of Brexit, the UK has begun to look more broadly at where its relationships are around the world and what those relationships look like. And we've gone through a period of time where Australia has been very much positioned as a part of Asia, mentally and in terms of our economy, as during the period that the UK has been focused on Europe. And so we feel that there's a moment of perhaps more nuanced getting to know each other at this stage. In addition, it's a critical moment for us. We know that artists have been for some years speaking a great deal about identity and addressing those subjects. And in Australia, this year is the year that marks the 250th anniversary of Captain Cook arriving on Australian shores. And this is a moment for us to explore together, perhaps more honestly, our shared colonial history and present. There's also a very clear overlay now in the COVID context of what it means to come together and to be in isolation and who we are as individuals. And it's a very good moment to look at who we might be together as two countries in the face of some global challenges. Climate change is a very clear one, and there are many other subject areas that people might be interested in exploring, such as who we are in the face of technology and in the face of global pandemic. We are both working bilaterally with Australia, and we are also working across art form and across sector. So this season is not just an arts program, it's also a higher education program. And there will also be a strong public engagement component, which will include publications, broadcast, and the digital offer as well. I think I will leave it there at that point, but I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of further questions around the content and the planning that I can come back to when we look at the criteria for the season. Thank you. I'd like to hand back to Michael.
Michael, would you like to join us again? Just while Michael turns his camera on, just a reminder to everyone that you can ask a question by using the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Just type it in there and we'll get to the questions as soon as we can afterwards. Actually, it looks like we've lost Michael, so I think we'll probably go straight to questions, and if he's able to join us again, we'll bring him back in. So can I invite Rebecca and Helen to turn their cameras back on and join me, and we'll just get going with questions.
Tom, would you like me to go through the criteria and the panel?
Good idea. I was a little bit thrown by Michael disappearing, so we'll do that.
Oh, he's actually just re-arrived.
He's back. Hi, Michael. Oh, I think you're on.
So sorry, everyone.
Welcome back. Would you like to talk us through the Australian season?
Yes, thank you, Dom, and thank you, Helen. From Australia's perspective, the season theme is incredibly relevant when we talk about who are we now, for the reasons that Helen's just expanded upon. it's a great opportunity for the Australian cultural sector to respond. There's been a lot of change happening self-evidently since the earliest relationships between Australia and the UK. And there's so much that binds us together, yet it's a relationship, of course, in so many ways, hides, one can be said, in plain sight. So the opportunity for the Australian cultural sector to explore under this rubric of Who Are We Now is hugely exciting. And indeed, it's a great opportunity for Australia to platform the wonderful work of our First Nations and Indigenous Australian artists. So amongst the cultural exchange, of course, there'll be an inclusion for higher education and public engagement, which will be a really fertile opportunity in this clearly troubling time for two nations that are so literally geographically distanced, to explore how we stay together and how we stay connected. It's very important, particularly with a diverse and multicultural community that Australia has. I think that there's a lot that we can showcase, and also equally there's a lot that we can learn, which we wish to learn from our friends in the UK. So from our perspective, it's a very exciting opportunity, and we're looking forward to being part of it. Thank you. Back to you, Dom.
Thanks very much, Michael. So we will go to questions in a moment, but before we do that, Helen's right, we'll bring her back to just talk through the call out that we've issued for UK-based organisations. So Helen, if you want to join me again, I've also got a slide where we can share them so you can talk to us in a bit more detail. So Helen, if you want to just join us.
That's fine, I'm here. Do you need my video as well?
No, it's okay.
Great.
There we go.
Okay, so I will run everyone through the criteria to participate. Just to be very clear, there is a criteria to participate in the season, and then there is a second stage for those who are interested in applying for grants. Those are separate things. This page is for people who are interested in expressing interest in being a part of the season. As discussed before, our theme is Who Are We Now? And that encompasses a really interesting breadth of how artists and higher education academics would like to lead that conversation, who we are in partnership. All of the, or part of the project needs to be presented, from my perspective, in Australia between the 1st of September to the 13th of March. And as Dom indicated, I know there are some Australian companies on the line today. DFAT will be giving the opportunity to have a similar briefing for Australian artists shortly. So that's why it just includes our dates at this stage. UK projects must demonstrate excellence and innovation in the cultural sector, and projects across all art forms and cross-art form projects are welcome to apply. They are not limited to touring. We are looking at residencies, we're looking at symposia. Critically, in the COVID context, we're very interested in digital work as well, and opportunities for broadcast. Projects must be financially viable with sufficient resources in place, and I'd like to make then that doesn't necessarily mean that all the finances need to be in place at the point at which you apply. Resources could be in kind, it could be partnership arrangements, and other opportunities to make the work happen. The applicants can submit multiple proposals, but you can only apply for a grant for one project. So if you have numerous things that you are interested in bringing to the season, do feel free to apply, but only one of those should be put forward for funding. Only organisations may apply for small grant support. I'll come back to that in a moment on the next stage criteria. Independent artists are absolutely welcome and encouraged to apply to be a part of the season. It's only this round of grants, which are organisations only. And finally, applicants do not need to apply for a grant in order to participate in the season. Can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks, Dom. So for those who do wish to go forward for funding, there are grants available up to £25,000 on the UK side. There is an independent advisory panel who is working with us on the funding criteria, and we will come to them shortly. Again, the project must speak to the theme. Specifically referring back to us working with organisations, we have a criteria that is they must demonstrate that the project is directly benefiting artists. or taking the sector forward in some way post-COVID-19. So we're very, very conscious that projects that receive funding need to be responsive to the COVID context in that way. Does the project demonstrate excellence in innovation? We've touched on before, best practice between the sectors in the UK and Australia. And does the project represent the diversity of the cultural sectors in the UK and or Australia? Does the project involve UK-Australia collaboration? That is an advantage in this application. And is the project led by a financially viable organisation with sufficient resources in place to deliver the project described in the application? So I'm sure a number of people have questions about this. The reason why we have been very specific about that in this application process is to ensure that at this stage, the projects that are going forward have some financial stability. Obviously, we're all dealing with this terrible situation at the moment with the COVID context and the economic devastation that's wreaked on the arts sector in both countries. So in terms of planning, we need to know that there is that stability behind the projects that are receiving funds which have been granted to us by the Patrons Board, so that we administer those funds responsibly. And does the project take place during the specified dates? People can ask me more about these various areas as we go on, but let's just move to the next slide, please. So this is our assessment panel. I'm sure the UK people will recognise these names. We have Jenny Waldman, Adelaide Bannerman, Ruth Fabi, Toby Chermitang, Claire Malcolm, Kane Smith, and Hugh Stevens, and they will be advising us on the grant process. Dom, I can leave it there if you would like to take it forward with specific questions.
Sure, thank you very much, Helen. I'll invite Michael and Rebecca to join us again, and we'll go to questions. We've had a few come through, but if you want to ask a question, remember you use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So I will get going with questions. And the first question that's come in, I think probably one for you, Helen. I imagine a lot of the questions here are going to be for Helen, so apologies, Rebecca and Michael, but I'll feel free to jump in if you wish. The first question is, when you say organisations, what in your eyes qualifies as an organisation? Are community interest companies eligible? Do they have to be established for a certain number of months or years?
That's a fantastic question, and absolutely, we are interested in artist-led initiatives, collectives. When I say organisations, I do not mean institutions, and I think we need to be very clear about that. Similarly, some higher education arts departments are interested in applying, and we consider that an eligible arts project as well.
Thanks very much. The next question that's came through is, I work with a UK theatre company that is developing a collaboration with Parramatta, apologies if I pronounced that incorrectly. It is likely to be presented in Australia in January, February 2022, but have at least one development visit to identify Australian collaborators. Is there a possibility for this sort of two-tiered project to be supported by the season?
Yes, absolutely. The funding that we have in place relates to the actual dates of the season, but as many of you will know, working with British Council, we do support with brokering and connecting visits, etc. And we work very closely with a number of companies in Parramatta, and we'd be very interested in hearing more about them.
The next question, Michael, you might have an answer for this, I'm not sure. The question is, has the Australian government set any date for allowing visitors?
For allowing visitors, well, that's not within my remit to comment upon. I wish I could, but I'm simply not in possession of information. I'm sorry. The only practical advice I would offer, which is the same for all Australian citizens, and indeed those that would wish to come, would be to keep a close eye on the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade's website, it's called Smart Traveller, and all the information will be posted up there as it's updated. Okay,
Helen, do you want to add to that?
I just thought it might be a useful moment to add to Michael's comments that just for context, obviously none of us can predict the future, but at the moment Australian theatres are allowed to open with social distancing. Like the UK, the financial implications of opening with social distancing are being worked through, and most theatres and performance venues have not opened, but galleries and museums have been able to open. So we're in a similar situation. We're a little bit ahead of the UK in terms of our opening dates. As Michael said, it's beyond our gift to say when international travel will be allowed, but we have been indicated that we will not see significant tourist international travel within 2020.
Thank you very much. The next question is about the content of the programme for the season, and the question is, does this include traditional trades and crafts? I wonder if you probably both want to answer that for the respective parts of the season, Helen and Michael.
Yes, yes, please.
Yeah, it does.
Important. It's particularly an important context when we're talking about First Nations Australians as well. There's some fascinating work being done in that space and collaborations, for example, between Wales and Australia and Scotland and Australia in the craft space. And I think that's something that we've talked about before. Michael, do you want to expand on that?
Oh, just to endorse that very point, particularly around First Nations culture, that we wouldn't, far from setting any limits, we'd welcome applications from arts practitioners in that space, absolutely.
Thank you. I think you might have covered this one already, Helen, when you were talking about the criteria, but the question is, can independent curators apply?
Independent curators can apply for the season, absolutely. And if they would like to apply for a funding grant, they would need to do that in association with some kind of collective or organisation or institution, as we discussed earlier, or an academic institution.
Thank you. The next question. Hi, for UK companies collaborating creatively with Australian companies, are both companies able to apply separately in their country for each strand of funding? Helen, do you want to take that one as well? Yeah.
No, we're asking that people select one country to apply through, and so in something which is a genuinely equal partners, you will need to determine which country you're going to apply for a grant. We aren't able to double fund in that way.
Okay. Lots of questions coming in. Thank you everyone for asking. I see that there's also some in the chat, but if you could put them through to the Q&A section, it'll just help us make sure we get through as many as possible. The next question, I think you actually covered particularly, but the question is, can you please speak to the reason why organisations and not individuals are eligible to apply for the small grant scheme? Can you outline eligible partnerships between individuals and organisations? So I think the first part of that question was definitely answered. I don't know if you want to reflect on the second part about what an eligible partnership would be between an individual and an organisation.
Thanks, Dom. It could be, I think the curatorial comment earlier might be a very good example. So an independent curator working with a gallery or an artist-led organisation would be one clear example. But there are many and various depending on the art form and the context. So.
Okay. A question, Michael, you probably want to take this one, and I can guess the answer. Can the work be premiered in the UK before the Australia dates?
Well, the simple answer is that we are looking for works that will appear during the season window. That's the expectation, and that's the purpose of the funding. Our season window, as far as Australia is concerned, is, as I said, August to November. So funding would follow the expectation that the works would certainly see their realisation in the UK during that window.
Great, thank you very much. Next question again for Helen. Is the British Council as an organisation delivering any arts or education programmes in Australia? And the same for the High Commission in the UK. Helen, do you want to take it first?
Do you mean outside of the season or an education strand alongside the season?
It's hard to say because the question just was okay. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what the Council does in Australia.
So our current programme, we do deliver arts and education programme. Our education programme is much slimmer than our arts program in country here. That's because there's actually incredibly strong relationships between the higher education sector of both countries, and we are in some ways collaborators, competitors for students in this region. So we work in a very specific targeted way, but we don't have broad programs. We work with specific stakeholders. In the art space, I would invite all of you to look at the Australia website for the British Council. We have a very clear focus here on equality, inclusion, and diversity. And we have a 10-year program called Accelerate, which was focused on working with First Nations cultural leaders, connecting them into 250 British arts organizations, which is very highly regarded in this country. We have another program called Intersect, which looks at who holds the power in decision-making in the arts in this country and in the UK. In fact, Adelaide Bannerman, who is one of our selection panel, is one of the fantastic alumni from that program. So you can get a sense of our interest and why this question of who are we now is so potent here today. We actually just launched today a cultural equity toolkit at the Sydney Opera House, which is sharing resources for the arts sector in Australia, sharing resources with the UK around equity and anti-racism in the arts sector here, which we did this afternoon. So if anybody's interested, they can find that on the Sydney Opera House website.
I've actually just received a follow-up from the person who asked the question, which was to say that my question was about what programme the BC is delivering during the season as opposed to what they are inviting other organisations to deliver. I don't know, Rebecca, you might want to jump in to talk about how the programmes of a season are pulled together, but Helen, Rebecca, feel free.
I think I should ask Helen to actually answer the specific question about Australia, but I think the broader point is that these seasons are sort of baskets of things, and they're sort of many and various in the way that they're put together. But Helen, specifically around the Australia season, are you going to be delivering a programme, a bespoke British Council programme? I think the other sort of principle is that we always work in partnership.
That's right. So we do have someone, Anna Hay, who is our arts lead in this country, is working specifically on the public engagement program. So BC will be all of the talks programs, some of the online symposia that we're looking at. We're looking at doing a major piece with Adelaide Festival, who went carbon neutral last year, around the sector. I mean, this is an extraordinary time. We've been forced into making some decisions more quickly than we may have otherwise, which is fantastic. But how do we, as two countries so indelibly linked in our relationships, continue to exchange culture in a climate context in a way that reduces the impact? What does that look like in the future? And COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to explore some of that, but we all, none of us want to work digitally completely for the rest of our lives either. That's not what we do. So we will be co-curating some of those pieces with partners, and we will be essentially having, as Rebecca said, working with partners to have an overview of the public engagement elements of the program.
And if I may, I'll just add very briefly, certainly because I think the question did ask in respect to Australia too. We will also be having a education program, which is in development currently. There are partners that the Australian High Commission works very closely with and will continue to do so, not least being the Menzies Australia Institute, which is housed at King's College in London, with whom the Australian High Commission has a very close relationship, and we'll be looking to develop various education and engagement pieces around the cultural components that we expect will come to the UK. So it's all in development at the moment, but certainly so far as the High Commission is concerned, having an engagement part to explore some of the issues and the themes. That's the whole beauty of this question that says, who are we now? Our hope is that whilst we have the cultural experience, then we'll be following up with opportunities for people to gather and to talk about and to dissect and critically analyse quite what that experience was and what the relationship stands for in the future. So that's a central component of what we'll be looking to achieve.
Thank you very much. We've got about 70 questions sitting, so I'm going to go through some quite practical questions quite quickly. Helen, I think probably directed mostly towards you again. If the aim of the project is long-term exchange, is it okay to start in the September to March dates but continue after that?
Yes, please. We would very much like to encourage that. We are actually, I should say that, the thing that makes us different from a festival, I am not curating a festival in that sense. What we are trying to do is to create the conditions in which the sector can flourish together and take their relationship further. And one of our primary KPIs essentially is how do these relationships develop 1 year after the season and 4 years after the season. And part of what we do in the platform for artists around the season is to build those opportunities for people to meet and connect while they're here and to develop the sector. And it's worth noting that I think some of the work that will happen will be things that the public do not necessarily know about. We might be doing things that are around taking our practice forward, that are fundamental for our sectors together, but don't necessarily have a public interest element, and that's just as important as the touring work.
Thank you. 2 questions now, which are, I'd say, related. What % of the budget should the small grant represent? And with the resource that our organisation has, what % of the project do we need to demonstrate we are using towards the total project budget? So kind of, is there a limit? Does the grant need to have a match funding, for example?
No, you have to show that there is sufficient resource to do what you want to do, but we don't have a proportionate limit on that.
Sure. Another eligibility question, would a commercial gallery be eligible too?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, I'm part of a small arts collective. If we apply for funding and are not successful, will it damage our chances of participating generally?
No, but that's a very good question. I would suggest a plan B scenario if you don't have the funding, obviously, so that you can come back, but you just have to show that you have the resource to take the project forward in order to be a part of the season and, obviously meet the other criteria.
Thank you. Okay, a question here about the organizational stability that you talked about earlier. So when talking about organizational stability, do you essentially mean organizations aren't going bankrupt? Could an organization with no financial issues, but not all funding in place for the project, e.g. applications still to do to the Arts Council, but all outstanding funding budgeted, still apply? Or do you need to have the co-funding in place already? Yeah, I think you're on mute there, Helen.
Sorry, I just wanted to see if someone else wanted to take a question. You do not have to have 100% of the funding in place, but priority is going to be given, as one of the criteria to projects that are able to demonstrate that they know that they have the resources. So again, it doesn't have to be a financial resource, and if your organization is able to demonstrate that you can take the project forward without the existing funds, then that's fine.
Great. Another eligibility question, are there any particular costs that cannot be covered? No, lots of head shaking. We're going to say no to that one. Is the focus of this season the east of Australia only, or is it Australia-wide?
Australia.
Absolutely Australia-wide, yes.
Australia-wide.
Okay. Question here, please could you talk a little more about the theme, Who Are We Now? Can you offer some examples as to what responses you would expect to receive? Maybe, Michael, you could take that one, and then Helen, you could follow up as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that by implication, the question itself is such a broad rhetorical statement that we're reluctant to prescribe how anyone would wish to respond, to be frank. And I think, as Helen has suggested just a little while ago, one of the great advantages, certainly from Australia's side, that we see in the season is its conceptual difference from being a festival, a la an Adelaide Festival or indeed an Edinburgh Festival, is the absence of a centralised curator allows a lot more latitude. And I think at this particular time where there's a great amount of change afoot, that to have artists themselves be able to respond to what it is that who we are now is the beauty of this model. So we'll be inviting and not prescribing what those rules should be. We'll be letting the arts and the arts sector decide.
Helen, do you want to pick up on anything there, or?
I'm really happy with Michael's response. Yeah.
Great. Next question, could you talk a little bit more about the grants? If I got that right, I think you said that grants have up to £25,000. How many grants will be available, and are there any deadlines to submit the application?
Yes, so the deadline is the 17th of August. I don't know exactly what time GMT, but you can look on the website for that, and the frequently asked questions. I can't tell you the exact number right now because it depends on whether we are giving the £25,000 to each project, or if some projects are asking or requesting for less.
Thank you. The next question, do we need to have an Australian partner in place by the time we apply? We've only just seen this opportunity, so we'll take time to firm up those connections.
Again, it's not a yes or no answer to that question. I think when it comes to who meets the criteria for the funding, then you are likely to have more points if you have those relationships already established. But I recognize that, you know, what part of our agenda is to see this opportunity reach people who perhaps don't have those existing relationships yet as well. So in terms of becoming part of the season, there's more flexibility around that. I think it's quite important to mention at this stage, I don't know how many people are aware of that, but the research that DCMS has done, the Australian market for British arts and culture, which includes recorded media, is the third biggest market for British arts and culture worldwide after the US and Europe. So although we are in a horrific time financially, anything that British Council can do to help expose people to that market or have them consider that market, I think, you know, may, I hope, for some companies be a part potentially of our recovery. And Dom is going to put a link, which I think may actually be on the website pages for the season, to a really fantastic article, which is an overview of the Australian sector and interviews a number of people like Bryony Kimmings, who makes a third of her income from Australia every year, and various other companies who work here regularly. And I'd really highly recommend that people take time to read that.
Great, thank you very much. Another technical question, can projects involve a third partner country, i.e. take place in the UK, Australia and another country?
Yes, it can. And we also had a question earlier, I think, about nationality, and you know, please note, if you live and work in the UK, you are eligible. This is part of who we are now.
Thank you very much. A follow-up here from someone. Can I pick up on the first question? Helen said that artist-led initiatives were welcome, but is there a hard and fast definition of what qualifies as an organisation in order to apply for the funding? Do you need to be a registered company? Could a collective of artists apply for the funding? Helen, do you want to take that one again? It depends on how that is constituted. Would it be possible to, I think there's an inquiry email, would it be possible to drop us a note about what you're thinking, whether it's a completely informal assembly, whether there is some structure behind that? Because that would be something that we could answer in your specific context. Sure. So for that person, you can email us. The address is inquiries@britishcouncil.org.au, and we'll reply to your question on the platform so you can get that email address. Okay, lots and lots of questions coming in. I think we've answered quite a lot of them, but some more general ones for Helen and Michael. What are the thoughts on digital festival twinnings? We are very keen to twin Essex Book Festival with Melbourne-based Emerging Writers Festival or Melbourne Writers Festival. This could include artist-writer residencies around the theme of Who Are We Now? Any thoughts? Brilliant. I think you said when you were on mute there.
I think that's an excellent idea. Helen, you're on mute. It's a fantastic idea. I mean, we'd encourage very much digital innovation and new relationships like that. It sounds really exciting.
I'd endorse that same proposition. I think it's inevitable and in fact necessary and required that we respond to the circumstances. And certainly there are few sectors of our society better set up to respond to the challenges, not least COVID, than our arts and cultural sector. They're always at the cutting edge, and I think adopting and utilising and leveraging digital technology to bring cultures together, this is a perfect showcase for that. And literature is an ideal one, self-evidently, to use digital technology to bring forces together. So I think where, of course, we just don't know, as Helen has said many times, as we all are aware, we just don't know the degree to which we'll be able to physically move around the world in the next 12 months. We all hope and pray things will ease up, but to the extent that we do, we'll remain in a state of uncertainty. Supporting and recognising that digital technology helps our artistic community to help our societies to stay connected and to explore this question is vital. I think that's part of our responsibility. So we'd be hugely supportive of getting behind digital initiatives in particular.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question, well, actually two questions which are phrased differently, but perhaps the same question. First one is, excuse my ignorance, but what would be the motivation for applying to be part of the season without being funded? Is it not a one-off kind of event? And the second question is, what support and benefits will being part of the season provide?
Rebecca, would you like to take them through the benefits around the platform and the critical mass of work, that conversation?
Yes, I mean, it's a really good question. I think when we have a better understanding of what's in the programme and who will be part of the season, we will be able to develop a really sophisticated marketing communications plan around the programme, and also potentially a broader public engagement programme as well, perhaps using some of the assets, the artists and the ideas of the programme. It's quite hard to predict without knowing what it is, but also potentially we might be able to do some round tables, some opening events. There's an opportunity for us to look at the whole of the programme and see what can we bring together to make the whole larger than the sum of the parts, if you see what I mean.
And one of the key things is, you know, there is a degree of amplification that you can get with a piece of work when it tours Australia. There's a completely another level of public engagement and amplification that you get when you're part of a national conversation. And I think that's really that's why we partner with government. That's why we're partnering with business around things like green growth. That's why we partner across higher education and the arts, is to create that national conversation. And that will advantage companies who are involved in it.
And can I just add also the connection between the art and the education piece is actually really, really important here. And so I think it's for us as the British Council to look at those connections and see what conversations we might be able to instigate.
Thanks very much. Back to some questions about eligibility. As an independent artist, is it possible to be involved with more than one project as part of the season and/or be part of multiple grant applications with different organisations? Most of what you were talking about was organisations, so I just want to clarify. Helen, do you want to take that one?
I think an independent artist working with a number of different organisations is fine. I think that they because the applications are coming from different organisations. I would note that if I'm thinking of an example, if it's about producing a singular artist and that singular artist is the main focus of each piece of work, that might, obviously there might be duplication there, and the assessment panel would not want to fund multiple ones, but there's nothing to stop an artist. And I'm thinking in particular, for example, a theatre designer, or there'll be a number of contexts in which people may be involved in more than one project. Actors.
Okay, what happens after the initial stage of application? Could you say anything about the other milestones along the way in deciding what projects to include? actually, I think I could answer that question better than anyone else here. I'll just say that the first stage after that is that our British Council art form specialist teams will be looking at those applications and creating a shortlist, which will then pass to the assessment panel, which Helen described to us earlier. And that panel will make recommendations about which projects to receive the funding. We have a turnaround time, I think, around about October, but we'll get back to you with the exact date of when organisations should hear. It's quite a quick process, and we hope that organisations will have at least 1 year to develop their project after knowing whether or not they're going to get the small grant support. Okay, lots and lots of questions coming in. We're not going to get through them all. So I'm going to try to see if there's any trends in them. Okay, can an independent artist creator in the UK have an Australian organisation as the partner in terms of handling the finances? I think that question's come through a few times. So, you know, Helen, can an Australian organisation apply?
Yes, they can. What I would advise is to think about, and I think it's pretty clear in the on the website, to think about the purpose of the British Council stream and DFAT stream. So for example, if you are an independent artist who has been invited by the Melbourne Performing Arts Centre to perform, Melbourne Performing Arts Centre could in principle apply to DFAT for support as an Australian organisation, but DFAT is not likely to fund that because it doesn't actually benefit the Australian work in the UK. So just think that through. If you are an independent organisation working, if you're an independent working with an Australian organisation, you might need to, I would actually say when you know your exact contact us would be the best thing. But you might need to think through which country you make that application from.
Okay. A few questions coming through on touring, around theatre particularly, but actually more general. So the question is, could you give us an update on the feasibility of touring theatre projects to Australia in just 18 months' time? And then a related question was from someone else, will multi-city touring projects be looked more favourably compared to one city focused events that may take place over a longer period? Helen, do you want to take that?
I'll come to the second one first. Multi-city touring is obviously fantastic. It wouldn't make a difference to the upper level of the grant, but reach is really key. And I think particularly in the Australian context, you know, we're the size of the USA. Coverage in this country is more challenging, and that's where digital is particularly important on my side to ensure that there's very good regional and remote access for audiences as well. So all of that is an advantage. However, it is not a criteria of the funding. So I wouldn't say that that's a deal breaker. That's the second, the first half of the question is what our expectations are for touring. We are very hopeful because it's more than a year away. The indications, you know, it's like anything else, I can't tell you what's going to happen. But the indications are that the travel companies like Qantas and the airports, etc., would like to be up and running by around March with, you know, be what they call closer to back to normal around March. Theatres certainly do not want to still be closed in a year's time. And as I said, they're permitted to open now. They just need to find a financial model to do that. So I think the mood here is very much that we will be back in business in some context at that stage. I can certainly say to you that the international festivals are looking for international work by then. They're not looking for international work in the next 3 or 4 months, but they are in that period. And, you know, we very much hope that what's happening in Melbourne at the moment is not going to be an issue for us. But I think, you know, as Michael said earlier, we'll just have to watch the space on that.
Thank you. Question about...
I'll just say that certainly from Australian side, we're acutely aware because we go, our program predates Helen's, ours goes first. So we're acutely aware of the challenges inherent with the performing arts as an art form. Self-evidently, the challenges there are obvious, and we just don't know. So far as Australia is concerned, we would be inviting people to speak to us through Australian High Commission and DFAT, the information will be made available relatively soon. And it's a watching brief. Obviously it's in our interest, in everyone's interest, to help our arts community bring a program from Australia to the UK. But it's all within the context of what's actually feasible. So again, at the risk of overstating the point, I think the reality around looking at digital opportunities for our arts makers to continue that communication is vital. We need to have a risk mitigation strategy for all applicants, I think, going both ways, to think about how we would conceive of cultural exchange taking place if the fear that we have, which we hope won't eventuate, that we may not be able to travel the degree to which we wish. But it's just a watching brief, Dom. Back to you.
Thanks. I'll actually keep with you, Michael. I've got a very quick question to answer. When will the call out for the Australian High Commission happen?
Yeah, thanks, Dom. We're expecting that will happen around the 28th of July, towards the end of the month. The date's not precise. We're still working on some of the final details, but towards the end of the month, you'll see details made available through the same portal on the British Council website, and then there'll be cross-links with the Australian High Commission website.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Audiences, sorry, did you want to add something?
No, it's just thanks.
A question about audiences. We haven't discussed audiences so far. Is this only an artist-to-artist conversation, or is there any room for developing audiences for work as well? Helen, do you want to take that one?
Does someone else want to take it? That's more general.
Yeah, I can have a go. I mean, clearly artists reaching audiences is incredibly important. And the reason why we are having a much more of a kind of institution to institution, artist to artist conversation is because that's the way that we work. But ultimately, we want to reach audiences through the work, and developing audiences is also incredibly important to the programme. And you know, we look forward to all ideas that enable us to do that.
Thanks, Rebecca. Question here, is there additional marketing support and resources for visas, or do these need to come from the grant? Helen?
We do. The season will have a substantive marketing platform in both countries. And so there wouldn't be an additional marketing grant beyond any grant that you may have accessed through this process. But there will be a season website. We will have our own season marketing program. We'll be working in partnership with other organizations to amplify that. What was it? I've forgotten the other half of the question, that marketing plus, oh, visas. No, we don't, there's no sort of financial assistance or preferential assistance for visas.
Okay, thank you very much. We've got about 5 minutes left and loads of questions to get through, so I don't think we're going to get to them all, but we will try to follow up afterwards by adding any frequent questions to the FAQ section of the website, and we'll share a link with people afterwards. But we can squeeze in a few more questions. As an organisation curating art, would we be limited in the nationality of artists we choose for exhibition? So I think we spoke a little bit about that with the third country question earlier, but would there be any limits to only having UK artists in Australia and Australians in the UK, for example?
No, not at all. If your work is representing UK work, in the sense that these people are, the company is working in the UK, that's UK work.
Okay, I'm just trying to...
And I'd say the same, obviously, in reverse, Dom. Sorry, same.
Go for it.
Oh, that was the only point. I was going to say the same principle would apply so far as Australia is concerned.
Thank you. Question which I'm not sure we'll be able to answer, but do you have a list of relevant contacts at festivals organisations in Australia to help our approaches, rather than info at email addresses? I don't know if Rebecca or Helen wants to talk about how we work and the kind of brokering and connecting work that the British Council does.
There is, so if you look at the article that I mentioned earlier, that does go through the various festivals that are on offer. It probably, it may be info at site that they give. I'm not permitted to give out the artistic director direct emails, etc. So it would be a matter in that context of you contacting us through the inquiries with further details, and we could see what we could do.
Sure. A question here about eligibility again. We are a library who receives regular funding from Arts Council England. Our projects have emphasis in creative community work informed or led by our artistic development programme. Would this type of work be eligible? Would practice sharing with a library service in Australia be considered as a cultural partner?
Funnily enough, I have had a couple of conversations with library sector in this country, and yes, they would be there. There's a number of points of interest in that area, so we would be interested in hearing from you.
Thank you. Another eligibility question. Does the activity have to take place in Australia and the UK, or is either or okay?
Either or is fine.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say either or is fine. We're not looking for things to happen in both countries in all instances.
Thank you. A follow-up to the contacts question. Could the British Council help to suggest or advise on appropriate Australian partners?
Helen?
Yeah, we do that. I should just flag, and as I said, you can contact us through the inquiries line. I should flag, we do have quite a small team here, and if we have 500 requests to contact Sydney Festival, that's going to be problematic. So we will need to manage that. But in the first instance, I would start with that article, and then I would also talk to your art form leads in the UK, and you can contact us through that inquiries line as well.
Should we just add something about the art form leads in the UK? So if you are based in the UK, and you should be able to contact somebody in British Council who works in your art form. They're all listed on the Arts website.
And if anyone is looking for a contact that they can't find online, just let us know and we'll help you out.
It's also worth saying, you know, just to, sorry, Dom, but, you know, people do reflexively go to the big international festivals in the same way that everybody in Australia wants to work with Edinburgh and Manchester. The reality is that we have much more rich landscapes in both countries and many more opportunities. And that's really where the British Council can help, is to help you identify the range of opportunities that are available to artists in the UK.
Thank you very much. A question which Rebecca might be able to answer, it's from Wales. Will British Council Wales be supporting Welsh companies specifically as part of the season, as they did with the India Wales programme?
So the India Wales programme received funding from Arts Council Wales International. We do not have funding for them for Australia, but they will be involved in selecting applicants and helping us develop a shortlist before it goes to our panel.
Thank you. Another question about eligibility. Is existing work welcomed? We have an existing show that we performed as part of the Cultural Olympiad in London 2012 between First Nation, Australian and Welsh musicians. Is that something we could develop further for this season? I think you're on mute there, Helen.
I'm sorry. If it hasn't been seen in Australia, we'd be very interested in that. Absolutely. And coming back to what Rebecca just said about Arts Council Wales too, there's obviously, because the fact that there is not a scheme that is situated within the British Council in partnership with the Arts Council doesn't mean that you can't go to funders independently for that as well. We're not precluding that.
Thank you. I'm afraid we've run out of time. We answered 62 questions in that session there, and we have another 58 that we didn't manage to get to. So apologies if your question wasn't answered today. We will try and put a summary of any frequently asked questions on the FAQ section of the British Council website. Or if you want, you can email us with any questions or queries, and the email address is inquiries@britishcouncil.org.au. Feel free to get in touch with questions as the deadline approaches. I want to say thank you to everyone that joined. We had over 200 people on the webinar today. I want to say thank you to our panelists, and a big thank you to Claire, who has been doing the captions for us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining.
Yeah,
Thank you so
everybody.
much, everyone.